here with us today, our members, Board of Trustees, and staff, I want to welcome you to stand with Salman.
Defend the freedom to write. I want to thank our partners, the New York Public Library, Penguin Random House, and House of Speakeasy. I want to recognize those in solidarity: Penn International, the Authors Guild, Bronx Academy of Arts and Dance, Fledgling Writers Workshop, Ars Poetica, Cave Canem, Brown Council on the Arts, Little Puss Press, New York Writers Coalition, Center for Fiction, Lambda Literary, Asian American Writers Workshop, New Press, New Yorican Poets Cafe, Kundiman, Writers Guild, Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, Whiting Foundation, and Council of Literary Magazines and Presses. Thanks to all of you for being here with us. After opening remarks, we will turn to our remarkable group portrait to send a message to Salman and to the world. So please stick around. You can also write a message directly to Salman at our table on the right. Those will be delivered directly to him. When a would-be murderer plunged a knife into Salman Rushdie's neck, he pierced more than just the flesh of a renowned writer. He sliced through time, jolting all of us to recognize that horrors of the past were hauntingly present. He infiltrated across borders, enabling the long arm of a vengeful government to reach into a peaceful haven. He punctured our calm, leaving us lying awake at night, contemplating the sheer terror of those moments exactly 1 week ago on stage at Chautauqua. And he shattered our comfort, forcing us to contemplate the frailty of our own freedom. Today, we gather to stand with Salman, our stalwart leader and comrade who is enduring agony wrought by a 33-year-old vendetta, a death warrant that refused to die, a declaration of never-ending war on words. Authors, those with the talent, vision, and magical phrases that inspire audiences, are the power users of free expression. If they cannot pursue their craft without fear, none of us is safe to say our piece. So we stand with Salman in an effort to boost his spirits, but also in a determination to stiffen our spines. As we consider how to channel our distress, Salman's life offers a guide. After nearly a decade in hiding, when he finally felt able to move around the world again, Salman returned to the literary circuit with its readings, festivals, and parties, especially the parties. But he also threw himself into the work of PEN America, an organization that had stood alongside him in his darkest days. He became our president in 2004 and founded the PEN World Voices Festival a year later. He's been a constant, indefatigable champion of words and of writers attacked for the purported crime of their work. He has turned crisis into calling. I'll give just one example. In 2015, a South African novelist from a Muslim family made a remark praising Salman's work. She was attacked by men who put a knife to her throat and a brick to her head. She then came under intense pressure to renounce her words and publicly avow religious devotion. When she refused, she was forcibly committed to a mental institution with the assent of her family. She reached out to Salman, who sprang into action. He activated PEN colleagues around the world. He maintained continuous contact with her at all hours of the night. He was her lifeline, her father confessor, as he put it, at a time when she had no family, friend, doctor, or lawyer she could trust. He helped her draft public statements, mobilized his personal friends. He knew that having his visible support could inflame matters further, so he did it quietly, behind the scenes. Over 2.5 days, I got more than 30 emails from Salman, working relentlessly until the writer was freed. For me, it was part of the job. For him, it was an act of conscience. For all their years of tracking and stalking, the Ayatollahs and their accomplices badly underestimated this target. Not even a blade to the throat could still the voice of Salman Rushdie. Not for a minute, certainly not for a week. Just yesterday, we heard from Salman, who knows about this event and was intending to watch it on the live stream. He offered some ideas of what readings we should choose. Take that, Ayatollah. Take that, assailant. That brings me to today, this gathering. We come together in solidarity and defiance, but we also unite in celebration. We've gathered some of Salman's closest friends and colleagues. Gay Talese, who was part of Penn's mobilization for Salman back in 1989. Roya Hakakian, who has personal experience of being targeted by the Iranian government on US soil. We come together for a celebration of life, but in the truest sense, rejoicing that Salman survived and will recover. It reminds me of something he said about the Penn World Voices Festival, and I quote, "We can turn it into a celebration. We can turn it into a way of looking at people's work as work, not just because they are in jail or tortured, but to talk about them as artists. And I think that's what they would want." Salman spoke for scores of writers who've been persecuted and tormented and did not want their ordeals to subsume their identities or to drown out their imaginations. So, fittingly, today we will celebrate Salman because of what he has endured, but even more importantly, because of what he has engendered. The stories, characters, metaphors, and images that he has gifted to the world. Perhaps above all, we celebrate Salman's perseverance, his creative perseverance and bounty, his perseverance in the face of peril, his perseverance on behalf of ideals and principles that we must recognize will never be truly secure and will always demand our vigilant, valiant defense. At a time when book and curriculum bans are spreading like forest fires across this country, when lies and disinformation are engulfing our politics, we cannot hope for the best. We cannot look away. We cannot falter. We need to fight with vigor as if all our freedoms depended on it, because they do. Hoping that Salman is indeed tuned in from the hospital, in closing, I want to say to him, Salman, all week I've found myself thinking about what you would hope we would say or do. How would you have us meet this moment? You are the voice in my head steering what it means to rise in principled defense of free expression. I hope we do right by you, and even more than that, I hope and hold faith that you will very soon be back in action where you belong, helping to lead this fight. Thank you very much, and over to our representative from the New York Public Library. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. Many thanks to PEN America for helping to bring us together and for their steadfast defense of the freedom of expression that is a value our two institutions share. That is why we are here. That is why we are on the steps of the New York Public Library, this great symbol of free and open access to information for all. We are here to safeguard the very principles that are at the heart of what our library and all libraries stand for. The free exchange of ideas and the ability for everyone, for anyone, to have access to books, to knowledge, to information. That's been the cornerstone of our mission for more than 125 years. Salman Rushdie has always been a devoted advocate for free expression. He's also a longtime friend of this institution and has spoken here on those topics many, many times. We are so proud to have his books on our shelves. In 2008, we named Salman a Library Lion to honor his commitment to exploring the depths of creative expression and for being a defender of free thought. In recognition of this shared commitment, we join Penn today. It is critical that writers, all thinkers, all people, all voices, feel safe and empowered to share their perspectives and their vision with the world. The library is a champion of freedom. The freedom to read, the freedom to speak, the freedom to learn, and yes, the freedom to write. Now more than ever, we fight for those freedoms, and we stand against censorship, we stand against fear, and we stand against silence. Now please join me in welcoming Dwayne Betts to begin our readings.
I am here because Solomon Rushdie's words matter. And I am here because today he cannot say those words to you, but we can. My name is Reginald Dwayne Betts, and I am a poet. From The Power of the Pen, 2005 Arthur Miller Lecture at the Penn World Voices Festival, given by Salman Rushdie. A butterfly flaps his wings in India, and we feel the breeze on our cheeks here in New York. A throat is cleared somewhere in Africa, and in California there's an answering cough. Everything that happens affects something else. So to answer yes to the question before us is not to make a large claim. Books come into the world, and the world is not what it was before those books came into it. The same can be said of babies or diseases. Books, since we are speaking of books, come into the world and change the lives of their authors for good or ill. And sometimes change the lives of their readers too. This change in the reader is a rare event. Mostly we read books and set them aside or hurl them from us with great force and pass on. Yet sometimes there is a small residue that has an effect. The reason for this is the always unexpected and unpredictable intervention of that rare and sneaky phenomenon, love. One may read and like or admire or respect a book and yet remain entirely unchanged by its contents. But love gets under one's guard and shakes things up. For such is its sneaky nature. When a reader falls in love with a book, it leaves its essence inside him, like radioactive fallout in an arable field. And after that, there are certain crops that will no longer grow in him, while other, stranger, more fantastic growths may occasionally be produced. We love relatively few books in our lives, and those books become parts of the way we see our lives. We read our lives through them, and their descriptions of the inner and outer worlds become mixed up with ours. They become ours. Love does this. Hate does not. To hate a book is only to confirm to oneself what one already knows or thinks one knows. But the power of books to inspire both love and hate is an indication of their ability to make alterations in the fabric of what is. Goodwill, Salman. Thank you.
My name is Jeff Eugenides. And when I was 20 years old, I was traveling through London. And having just read Midnight's Children and loved it, I thought it might be a nice idea to meet the author. So I looked him up in the London phone book. There it was, under the R's, Rushdie, Salman, along with an address and a telephone number. I took the tube out to his house. As it turned out, Salman wasn't at home. He was in Italy vacationing, but his mother-in-law let me in to the house. We chatted a while. I told her while I was there, she got me a piece of paper. I wrote a note to Mr. Rushdie, and I left it for him, and then I went back to my hotel. That was the world we used to live in, a world where the only craziness that might be visited upon a writer came in the form of a young, over-exuberant reader who showed up at his doorstep. That world was called civilization. Let's try to hang on to it.
My name is Siri Hustvedt. I am reading from the third-person memoir, Joseph Anton. The passage comes from early in the book. I am reading it in honor of a dream of genuine, democratic, perspectival pluralism, a pluralism that acknowledges not only the mixed, impure, complex realities of history, but of every person's hybrid becoming in his, her, their own history, and their right to free expression in fiction and nonfiction with ruthless sincerity or wild irony. Without this freedom, literature is nothing but an echo chamber of the fleeting platitudes and truisms that afflict every culture. We have more than enough of that in the debased world of media. It is time to listen and listen carefully. It was unsettling not to understand why the shape of life had changed. He often felt meaningless, even absurd. He was a Bombay boy who had made his life in London among the English, but often he felt cursed by a double unbelonging. The root of language at least remained, but he began to appreciate how deeply he felt the loss of other roots, and how confused he felt about what he had become. In the age of migration, the world's millions of migrated selves faced colossal problems of homelessness, hunger, unemployment, disease, persecution, alienation, fear. He was one of the luckier ones, but one great problem remained, that of authenticity. The migrated self became inevitably heterogeneous instead of homogeneous, belonging to more than one place, multiple rather than singular, responding to more than one way of being, more than averagely mixed up. Was it possible to become good at being, not rootless, but multiply rooted, not to suffer from a loss of roots, but to benefit from an excess of them? The different roots would have to be of equal or near equal strength, and he worried that his Indian connection had weakened. He needed to make an act of reclamation of the Indian identity he had lost or felt he was in danger of losing. The self was both about its origins and its journey. To know the meaning of his journey, he had to begin again at the beginning and learn as he went. It was at this point in his meditations that he remembered Salim Sinai, this West London-based Proto-Salim had been a secondary character in his abandoned manuscript, The Antagonist, and had deliberately been created as an alter ego. Salim, in memory of his Bombay classmate, Salim Merchant, and because of its closeness to Salman and Sinai, after the 11th century Muslim polymath Ibn Sina, Avicenna, just as Rushdie had been derived from Ibn Rushd. The Salim of The Antagonist was an entirely forgettable fellow and deserved to drift up a Ladbroke Grove into oblivion. But he had one characteristic that suddenly seemed valuable. He had been born at midnight, August 14, 1947, the freedom at midnight moment of India's independence from British rule. Maybe this Salim, Bombay Salim, Midnight Salim, needed his own book. He himself had been born 8 weeks to the day before the end of the empire. He remembered his father's joke. Salman was born, and 8 weeks later, the British ran away. Salim's feat would be even more impressive. The British would run away at the exact moment of his birth. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Colin McCann. I want to thank you all so much for coming out today. There's a line from the Muwallaqat, which are a series of 6th century pre-Islamic poems that were hung in the marketplaces in the Arabic world. And one of the lines from that series of poems says, "Is there any hope that this desolation can bring us solace?" And I think if we examine it, it's very difficult to look at these times and to find some solace. But one of the things that I'm excited for is when Salman comes back and has something to say to us. He has always risen to the moment. And I think he will have something profound to say about who we are, and where we're going, because he has always done so. And as you recall, when the terrible things unfolded in Paris with Charlie Hebdo, people went around with T-shirts saying, you know, "Je suis Charlie." Well, today, nous sommes Salman. This is a piece from The New Yorker. It's called Out of Kansas. It was written in 1992. It's about Salman's first ever short story. It's kind of appropriate. I wrote my first story in Bombay at the age of 10. Its title was Over the Rainbow. It amounted to a dozen or so pages, dutifully typed up by my father's secretary on flimsy paper. And eventually it was lost somewhere on my family's mazy journeyings between India, England, and Pakistan. Shortly before my father's death in 1987, he claimed to have found a copy mouldering in an old file, but despite my pleadings, he never produced it, and nobody else ever laid eyes on the thing. I've often wondered about this incident. Maybe he didn't really find the story, in which case he had succumbed to the lure of fantasy, and this was the last of the many fairy tales he told me. Or else he did find it and hugged it to himself as a talisman and a reminder of simpler times, thinking of it as his treasure, not mine, his pot of nostalgic parental gold. I don't remember much about the story. It was about a 10-year-old Bombay boy who one day happens upon a rainbow's beginning, a place as elusive as any pot of gold end zone and as rich in promises. The rainbow is broad, as wide as the sidewalk, and is constructed like a grand staircase. The boy, naturally, begins to climb. I have forgotten almost everything about his adventures, except for an encounter with a talking pianola, whose personality is an improbable hybrid of Judy Garland, Elvis Presley, and the playback singers of Hindi movies, many of which made The Wizard of Oz look like kitchen sink realism. My bad memory, what my mother would call a forgettery, is probably just as well. I remember what matters. I remember that The Wizard of Oz, the film, not the book, which I didn't read as a child, was my very first literary influence. More than that, I remember when the possibility of my going to school in England was mentioned, it felt as exciting as any voyage beyond the rainbow. It may be hard to believe, but England seemed as wonderful a prospect as Oz. The wizard, however, was right there in Bombay. My father, Anis Ahmed Rushdie, was a magical parent of young children, but he was prone to explosions, thunderous rages, bolts of emotional lightning, puffs of dragon smoke, and other menaces of the type also practiced by Oz, the great and powerful, the first wizard deluxe. And when the curtain fell away and his growing offspring discovered, like Dorothy, the truth about adult humbug, it was easy for me to think, as she did, that my wizard must be a very bad man indeed. It took me half a lifetime to work out that the great Oz's Apologia Pro Vita Sua fitted my father equally well, that he too was a good man, but a very bad wizard. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. First, I have a message from our photographers who want you to make a huge fuss. Hold up your signs, give out a big cheer, and let everyone, including Salman, who's hopefully watching this, hear your presence and that you're here and that you're supporting him. So hold out your signs. Great. Thank you. My name is Roya Hakakian. I'm here today both in three capacities. One, as an avid reader of Salman's. Two, as a fellow writer. And three, as an Iranian who wants him and everyone else to know that we stand with him and we're all in this together. Thank you. I'm reading a passage from Harun and the Sea of Stories from chapter 1, the Shah of Blah. There was once in the country of Aleph Bay a sad city, the saddest of cities, a city so ruinously sad that it had forgotten its name. It stood by a mournful sea full of glumfish, which were so miserable to eat that they made people belch with melancholy, even though the skies were blue. In the north of the sad city stood mighty factories in which, so I'm told, sadness was actually manufactured, packaged, and sent all over the world, which never seemed to get enough of it. Black smoke poured out of chimneys of the sadness factories and hung over the city like bad news. And in the depths of the city, beyond an old zone of ruined buildings that looked like broken hearts, there lived a happy young fellow by the name of Harun, the only child of the storyteller Rashid Khalifa, whose cheerfulness was famous throughout the unhappy metropolis, and whose never-ending stream of tall, short, and winding tales had earned him not one, but two nicknames. To his admirers, he was Rashid, the ocean of notions, as stuffed with cheery stories as the sea full of glumfish. But to his jealous rivals, he was Shah the Blah. To his wife, Soraya, Rashid was, for many years, as loving a husband as anyone could wish for. And during these years, Harun grew up in a home in which, instead of misery and frowns, he had his father's ready laughter and his mother's sweet voice raised in song. Then